As many of you know, colleges and universities, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and also as a general movement toward more flexible admission policies, have begun offering test-optional policies. In fact, for the 2021 to 2022 admissions cycle, over 90% of the top 250 colleges had test-optional policies. And in this video, the question I'm going to ask is, who does test-optional hurt the most? We all know test-optional helps some people, namely people who suck at standardized tests. Thumbs up if that's you. But who does test-optional hurt? Has anybody really pieced that out? Who does it hurt and how does it affect people? And what is the domino that it releases and how does that hurt some people? That's what we're going to talk about in this video. My name is Brooke. I'm an independent college consultant and test prep tutor. I've been coaching the SAT and the ACT for over a decade and a half. If nothing else, subscribe to our mailing list. It's totally free, SupertutorTV.com/subscribe. I also have a couple of online courses for the SAT and the ACT. I've coached students perfect scores on both exams. So if you are playing the game of the test, be sure to check that out, as well as totally free videos on our channels. Click subscribe already, people. Thank you. So, a second winner in the test-optional game is also elite colleges who are trying to play a rankings game. Because with test-optional, they get to basically inflate the numbers on the test scores that are coming in. And this is going to play into who it hurts in a second here, by the way. So when elite colleges allow for a test-optional policy, the kids who have bad scores just stop submitting that. Everybody who is sort of at 25th percentile and below, they just won't even send the score at all. So then colleges and universities get to brag about their median test scores and they're going up and up and up, and suddenly they seem super rejective, right? And they seem super elite. It also helps elite universities because it allows elite universities to kind of let in whoever the heck they want, however the heck they want to, and use holistic admissions more to their advantage. And they can accept test scores or not accept them. They can kind of do what they want. It allows them to let in donor kids now, alumni kids who had crappy test scores before. It allows them to show more favoritism in ways to students who weren't as qualified, that it looked kind of bad to let those kids in before, but if only that student goes to a school with lots of inflated GPA, yay, we can let them in now and it looks great. And no one will know that they really weren't totally qualified. So that's another group that it helps, but let's talk about who it hurts. The first group that it hurts is anyone applying to highly rejective colleges. Now you're like, Brooke, why does it apply to anyone applying to highly rejective colleges? Save for the people who really suck at standardized testing. That one group, yes, it helps. Everybody else, I would say, applying to highly rejective, highly selective colleges, whatever you want to call them, elite colleges, it hurts those people. Because suddenly all those colleges that used to have 7% admit rates have 4% admit rates because so many darn people are applying. And when a pool increases, it just makes the whole process more frustrating for most of you, okay? The whole process becomes more frustrating because if you have straight A's and you did everything right and you could have gotten a great score on your SAT, but you decided not to take it, or you did get a great score on your SAT, either way, the competition is fiercer. Even if you are going test optional, the frustration of rejection is going to be higher for you because of test optional policies. And I know that's kind of hard to digest because some of you are like, oh my God, test optional is awesome. I hate the SAT. Yay, right? And you would just want to go celebrate. But what I'm telling you is it's going to create more stress and more uncertainty in the college admissions process for you, regardless of who you are. Even if you're somebody who was on the lower end of like test scores, but you were still, had a fighting chance with your old score, it's still going to create more stress and anxiety because more people can apply everywhere, and that means you're getting rejected more often, and that means it's harder to plan what colleges you want to go to, and you have to apply to more colleges to potentially get into one in the caliber of school that you want to attend. The next group that I think is hurt by this policy is students who would have prepped for the SAT or ACT, but think that tests don't matter at all, so they choose not to prep for them, even though everybody in their context is. So it's true that a lot of schools are saying it won't hurt you at all if you don't submit a score. But I would counter that of the students that I work with that go to private schools that are well-heeled and that are in environments that certainly have offered the test multiple times over the course of the last year, I am seeing a differential in statistics of my students who took the exam and scored over a 1550 and my students who went test optional when it comes to who got in, early decision, REA, that kind of stuff. I found that my students who took the test, and granted I have a small sample size, so I can't speak for everything, but I've found that my students who took the test, and this is this year and even last year in these admission cycles, and are in sort of this, 1% group financially, that have economic resources that go usually to elite private schools, if not very elite public schools, the ones who have a test score that is excellent, especially like near perfect scores, are faring better in admissions than my equivalent students in terms of GPA, activities, etc. Overall, that's what I'm seeing. I don't know if it's going to be true across the bandwidth, right? Across the different socioeconomic classes. This might not hold in those other socioeconomic classes. This might not hold for the middle class at all. I'm not sure. But for the elites, the people who have the finances, the people who have the means, when somebody at their high school is getting a 1600 and that kid is not, who are you going to let in? The kid with the same activities in the 1600 or the kid without it? Shoulder shrug. Admission to top 25 schools is more challenging than ever because this has opened the floodgates for a number of students applying. In particular, I think where we're seeing a lot more students apply from are like middle class kids who used to think, I don't have the test score for it, I don't have the money to do test prep, I never even thought I could get in, but maybe I'll just try this year because maybe I could get in. But in any case, I think it's hurting students who think, oh, I could have prepped for it, but I'm not even going to try because I'm just going to go test optional. And I think those kids could have helped themselves had they actually taken the test. But that test optional policy made them feel this false sense of security, and then they didn't go and take the test. And then I think eventually it ended up hurting them. Next on my list, students without a wow factor. Anybody who doesn't have a wow factor, it's a lot harder to stand out because anybody with a wow factor now can trump you in the admissions game, even though they don't have a test score. So because tests aren't always a piece of the puzzle, because it's a black box on a lot of students' applications, I'm finding that wow factor matters all the more, and that's just more pressure, et cetera, et cetera. Next on my list is students without a sob story. The other thing that's going to be big cachet in college admissions right now is anybody with the kind of tearjerker story that makes you cry and make you think, wow, that girl has such an awesome story. That's so amazing. Let's let her in. That was a beautiful story. Beautiful stories are going to have more power now that test scores aren't a part of your holistic admissions experience for a lot of you, and they're going to just pull more weight. So if you don't have that kind of a story, and somebody who doesn't have a test score does, they might beat you out despite your test score, even if you had one and it was really good. And finally, the last group who's hurt by test optional is students who are prepping for exams. Why? Well, test optional policies have created this climate where kids who don't have a good test score just don't submit them. And then there's a bunch of big black boxes on people's applications. And what that means is colleges and universities are reporting higher than ever median test scores because they have data shortages within their class. If you look at my videos this year, what's a good SAT score in 2021, what's a good ACT score in 2021, you'll see that there's a huge shift upward in trend, especially in schools ranked, say, 10 to 25. All the schools that are still looking at test scores in that range, we're seeing a trend upward, and suddenly the test score ranges for all those schools are now matching what top 10 schools used to be. So now if you're planning to take the test and you're planning to study for it, whereas in a test required environment, maybe a 1500 would have been enough, now it feels like, oh my gosh, I have to get a 1550. And so it's annoying because suddenly you have to have a higher test score to be in consideration and in the running for these top 25 schools, not just for top 10 schools, which is very annoying for anybody applying to schools in those range who's prepping for the test because you have to prep for longer and try to get a higher score. So that's also people who this hurts because it's just an annoying factor. Now, obviously, if you can prep to the higher score, you can use it to your advantage and put it in your application. But it's certainly kind of a frustrating point, and the whole system can be a bit of sandpaper to all of us. So there you go. There's some ripple effects of test optional that you might not have thought about. Maybe test required isn't as bad as it seems. And I know you all are like, but Brooke, you teach test prep. You're always on the side of test. As I've said before, I'm not completely anti-test optional. I do see a huge benefit for some of these students who, really have terrible trouble taking the test. But the problem is, if you take away the test, there are a lot of other factors going on that come into play. And I will say, as things even out and as COVID wanes, I think colleges and universities are going to start expecting you to take this. And if you don't take it, you're going to have to prove yourself somehow else. In the same way that every college application is activities optional, I guarantee you, if you turn in a college application with no activities, that's going to hurt you, right? And essentially, that's every college application. You cannot fill out the activities section and still apply to college. It doesn't exclude you from applying to college, but it certainly weakens your application. And I think that's increasingly the story that we're going to see with test optional. I think a lot of schools might stay test optional, but I also think that tests are going to matter more in the future once things sort of level out and people aren't worried about, their immunocompromised grandmother getting COVID. So that's where we're at. That's where I think we're headed. We'll see how everything pans out, but I hope you guys found this informational. And if anything else, tell us what you think in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I'll see you next time in the next video. Bye-bye.